Welcome, adventurer. I am DirkPickle, and this is my tavern. Now that you've stepped in, please find yourself a space and get comfortable. Grab a drink and listen in. We all have our stories to share. Today we have a tale of a particularly questionable DM and their antics, flirting with the girlfriend of another player, bestowing them with gifts, benefits and bonuses. Shall we begin? This was a long time ago. I want to say 7 or 8 years, so I may be a little hazy on the details, but this is how I remember it. We had a lot of people who wanted to play D&D. Someone tries running a 13-person session, which shockingly didn't work out. It literally ended after one session. I don't even remember what happened. One of the players talked around with people and offered to do a different campaign. Having always been interested in D&D but never playing, I helped convince a few of my friends to try it out. I wish I hadn't, but then I wouldn't be the DM I am now, so I guess that's the silver lining. We started playing using our same characters from the 13-man game. Our DM at the time was heavily into Dark Souls. Our final boss was literally going to be Ornstein and Smo, hyped up as a threat to the entire multiverse because they were just too strong. I was fine with that. I was excited to play. The party was myself, the Dampier Rogue, Jay, the Hobgoblin Fighter, Kay, the Fletchling Sorcerer, and N, my girlfriend at the time, playing a human paladin. Mind you, this was Pathfinder, so strict alignment rules, especially for paladins. There was this one time we had to infiltrate some base, so of course my character's time to shine. Only enemies had really high perception, and I almost got myself and the fighter, who had to ditch his armour to stealth, caught several times. We finally make it to a safe route where there's a bunch of low-level enemies, and I take out some rope, tell them to tie themselves up or I'll kill them. I'm thinking that's a good or neutral way to get around having to kill them. I rolled high on intimidation. They tied themselves up. I would later learn it wasn't. Around this time, while my PC and the fighter were infiltrating, the DM had one of his main quest giver NPCs show up out of nowhere, where the sorcerer and paladin were waiting, and start flirting a little with N, the paladin, played by my then girlfriend. I should have told him it made me uncomfortable, but the paladin insisted it was nothing serious and they were just playing. So I let it go. Only, it continues to happen. The NPC in question was some combat rating 30 plus, half bug arachnid person, who spends his time favouring the paladin during conversations, openly using his character to flirt with her. Actually convince her to get some in-game surgery that will give her cool bug features. Doesn't offer this to the rest of the party, however. Our characters were in a relationship, so we RP'd talking about it, and the paladin did it anyways. After this point, I would occasionally catch the DM smirking at me. I should have quit, but I didn't want to ruin the game for everyone. We go to some tower, and on the first floor is this huge fight. There's 2 enemies left. I'm almost dead. The fighter is knocked out. The sorcerer is fending off a melee attacker, and the paladin was, of course, untouched. So the sorcerer finally falls. I'm planning to rush over and try and save her. But it's the paladin's turn. We urge N, the paladin, to go and save Kay's sorcerer. She literally said, "Nah, I'm going to let her die." I go to smite the other opponent, and she smashes the other enemy. Meanwhile, the DM then goes into a small description of the sorcerer getting eaten by the creatures we were fighting, and all that's left is her bloody skull the creature spat up. We were upset, but I managed to crit the creature, finishing it off. The sorcerer now has to sit out for the rest of the session, which was thankfully only about an hour. We come back, the quest giver asks what happened. We explain that the sorcerer died and the fighter mentions that the paladin let her die. They start to argue, but the NPC just starts praising the paladin's strength and sends us on another mission. We meet Kay's new character, another sorcerer but with a different archetype. I have to mention that there was absolutely no in-game penalty for this. A lawful good paladin willfully letting someone they could have easily saved die with no real justification. There was no alignment change, power loss, nothing. The 3 of us were sitting there, confused. Sure, only one of us was experienced in Dungeons & Dragons, but by this point we all knew enough that willfully letting someone die was definitely not a good act. and we were waiting for something to happen to the paladin. Praise was not what we were expecting. We get hurried along into the next dungeon, end up going up this elevator and getting into another fight. This NPC attacks us out of nowhere and I land the killing blow. Immediately afterwards, we had time to heal, that was it. We get into another boss fight. The 4 kings. I managed to kill one of them too, and the other 3 swarm me and my character dies to 2 crits in a row. Who won the battle? The paladin, of course. After the battle I asked if there was anything I could do to have my character revived. He says, "It's hard for evil characters to be resurrected." But my character isn't evil. The DM responded with, "He tied up a bunch of weak creatures and threatened to kill them. And he killed that person who you fought at the top of the elevator. She was a good person." Then I said, "She attacked us. I wasn't even trying to fight. I tried to talk to her and she just kept attacking. And I was trying to be intimidating. I never actually intended to kill those people." We argued from there. Eventually, I got my character revived by one of the many high combat rating quest givers walking around. Once I convinced the DM my character was at the very least neutral, trying to be good. Of course, this didn't come without cost. Now my character was forcibly indentured to said high combat rating NPC. All this time, the flirting gets more and more intense until the DM and the paladin leave the implication that their characters spent the night together. I'm upset. Paladin still thinks it's no big deal. We go on. Fighter gets killed unfairly in a session he couldn't be there for. His character died because the DM had the fighter have sex with a different high-level NPC and it killed him somehow. The fighter is of course pissed, but plays it cool. Makes a new character, a halfling, I think Ranger, and tells me privately that he's pretty done with the game. He hates what it became and basically intends to screw us over by having his character flee. I failed to convince him otherwise, but I understood why he was upset. His character literally disappeared between sessions, went off to scout as the session ended, and then he never came back. We continue on. We end up having to, surprise, go infiltrate another tower, and we were forced to get wings surgically added to our characters. Only mine gets to come with pink glitter. By this point the paladin and the NPC are super into each other and the DM is just smirking at me every time they talk in game. They're openly flirting and mocking my character for wings he was forced to get that he didn't even want. At this point I finally had it, and I called out the DM on his shit. He tried to backtrack on the whole thing, but the paladin keeps trying to tell me it's a game and I don't need to take it seriously. We finished the session as we were about to fly off. We skipped a week. The sorcerer, the paladin and myself were all busy. The DM ended up having an unrelated breakdown 2 weeks later, and we never got back to playing. Paladin and I broke up for different reasons, though the open flirting and practically veering into a light ERP in front of me didn't help. In the end, I was glad to no longer be a part of that game. A couple of months later, I talked to the fighter, sorcerer and some of our other friends about trying my hand at being a DM, and I've been DMing ever since, and I think I'm doing well enough. And there we have it. What do you think? A bad DM overstepping the line? Or is it all just a game and should be taken more lightly? And have any of you ever tried to have a 13-player D&D game? Did it work out? From my experience, anything more than sort of 6 or 7 players is difficult, and I can't really ever see a 13-player game going too well. Anyway, that's all for today. Hope to see you another time at my tavern. The door is always open. Good night.